So let me just kind of summarize what we just talked about and create a framework that you can then take and now apply to your work and the content you're doing. So the first I'd recommend is the idea of get comfortable with zero-click content. This term was coined by my friend Amanda Natividad, and what zero-click content is essentially giving away 80% of your content without needing someone to click a link to go to your website and read the full blog post. Some companies will just share a new blog post as like a one-liner on LinkedIn saying, hey, we wrote a new blog post about this thing. Check it out. Link. That's not going to build an audience. That's not going to build any interest. That's just sort of like lazy content marketing. So giving away all like 80% of the content without a click actually, gets your message across, makes you seem more interesting, and counterintuitively actually leads to more clicks. In my newsletter, I pretty much give away 80% of what that blog post says in the email, so you don't even need to click through. But the click-through rates are always higher than if I just did like a one-liner and then the link plug. Second framework I would recommend is stop producing random acts of content. This is coined by another buddy of mine, Ronnie, and it talks about thinking about that bigger. Ronnie Higgins, and talks about that bigger narrative of how does this piece of content connect to what your prospect's thinking about, and then how does it connect to their bigger career aspirations, like how they're going to convince their CEO that they need to buy that thing, or how they're going to get budget, or how they're going to not get laid off in the next round if that so happens. So create larger narratives around these formats. So for us, instead of just doing these interviews behind closed doors, we do them publicly as a live session series where we bring on 3 marketers at a time to share their stories with people out in the open. And we call them Conversion Secrets Live, and we do them every month. And it just really drives that like groundswell of community engagement as well. And then the last bit here is build future pipeline by leveraging these super fans. My newsletter went out earlier today to like 35,000 people on our email list. We don't have 35,000 customers yet, but all these people are in some way interested in Mutiny. At one point they opted in, raised their hand and said, I want to learn more about Mutiny. I want to read your content. I want to get your newsletter. These are like super fans that you can build up until the point where it actually makes sense for them to buy. That might not be this year. It could be next year, but guaranteed, like the marketing world is small enough that if you have fans, they will follow you from whatever company you go to, and whatever company they go to, they'll want to buy your thing again because they love what you do. So here's just some screenshots of like people posting on LinkedIn, not me prompting them. These are just readers of the newsletter who are super excited about what we're doing. So that's all I'm going to say today. That was a lot to take in, but if you want to see what this looks like in person, go check out our conversion playbooks that I published through our newsletter. So mutinyhq.com/subscribe. Or if you were on your phone the entire time, just pull that out and point it at the QR code and it'll take you right to the page. And I would love to have you check out some of our sessions at one point. So thanks so much for taking a listen. And at this point, happy to answer any questions we have.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Stewart. That was super, super interesting. And actually super timely. So the last session was about how to drive our ARR by acting like a media company. Mm-hmm. So I think this is super related. You're essentially saying a very similar thing. How do you get your organization on board for moving away from the more traditional tactics, for making sure things are gated, from, just the kind of established playbooks to this new approach?
Yeah, I mean, you can always just test, do the gated stuff, but then also like start wedging that like more the zero-click content into your existing channels and just notice the reaction. Like it might not be, it might not create like a quantitative growth, but you'll start seeing it in your sales calls. Like if you have Gong, go in and start typing in like newsletter or content and see how often people prospects will start talking about your content, I guarantee you'll see an increase in people who are actually taking notice and like reading your stuff versus it just being an email, lead gen thing where people just, give me your email and you'll read this PDF. Like I've never read a PDF. Like right. I don't read PDFs anymore. Right. On the idea about like creating thinking like a media company, this is how network TV, this is how streaming platforms, this is how they all do it. This is their playbook. It's not just like, we have your email, we're going to sell you now. It's like, take a look at this behind the scenes of a new TV show that we're launching. Oh, you watched the Super Bowl? Guess what? There's actually like a post, like an after show that's going to break down what happened. Like there's always the next thing that they're introducing that is relevant to you because you're already in their ecosystem. Yeah. And once you have them in your ecosystem, it's so much easier to cross-sell, to launch new things, to introduce new concepts and ideas because they're already like consuming your stuff. Right. And so I would say that if you're getting pushback and they just want emails, push back and say, okay, but what are we going to do with these emails? Are we trying to close them in like 2 weeks? If you're selling like an enterprise piece of software, you're not going to get a deal in 2 weeks. Right. So think about the long term, like get this person on your email. Think about how much you can influence the deal by creating content that is exactly what that person needs to hear at that moment in time to click a light bulb. They have the realization. They talk to their boss. That boss has a realization. You can feed them ideas that they can then, spread internally and increase the deal velocity that way.
So I think you touched on this, but I want to give, there's a question here from Andri. Sorry, I think that's how you pronounce your name. If I butchered it, my apologies. How do you get the leadership to understand the indirect value of this and that it won't be instant, but will compound over time? I think this is more about like, how do you bear out the numbers eventually, right? Because eventually that's what they're going to want to know.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you should still have an understanding of the levers within your website of where these leads are coming from. Like if you're a content marketer, in my case, I'm measured on pipeline that comes from the website because, I'm bringing people to the website. And so that is, you should still have a complete understanding of that. And that's why we have it met in Google Analytics. You've got a goal, which is like meeting booked. So we started with that. You have to earn trust within your company when you kind of start there. And so if you're able to hit those SQL goals, you then can be a little bit more experimental. So now that we've hit our SQL goals for, a number of quarters in a row, I introduced the concept of this owned audience and starting to build more of like this organic content distribution network. And so now my new goal is like subscribers, which aren't as a heavy lift. It's not like book a demo. It's more like, hey, do you want more content like this? You already like it. Cross-sell, here's a new thing. And so, the same way any independent creator, on like LinkedIn or Twitter, they'll post a big thread and then at the bottom they'll say, I also have a newsletter, but like no big deal if you join it or not, maybe don't be as flaky as them because they understand this inherently because they're playing the really, really long game. Sure. But we should start taking inspiration from these creators who can go from like, 1,000 to 100,000 followers in a year. Like there's no reason if you start acting that way and create content that people actually want, that a brand can't do the same thing.
Awesome. Stewart, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. That was an enlightening talk. Everybody hold on for just a little bit.
Thanks, Gary.